When Destiny 2 first came out, I was amazed. It seemed as though it was honoring the first in such a way that its legacy could continue. In its prime, the first Destiny was my life. I lived and breathed the game, and to this day I have no regrets. It has been and probably will remain my favorite game of all time. Sure, it had its shortcomings, such as the kind of empty characters and strewn together campaign, but the positives astronomically outweighed the few negatives it had. It offered something to everyone, from collectibles to lore, from PvE to PvP. Alongside the raids, it even had end-game PvP in the form of Trials of the Nine. The game was a well-rounded masterpiece that seemed to make everyone happy on all ends of the spectrum. The first DLC expanded the universe and added in another raid that was almost as fun as the first. It brought us new weapons, new armor, new ways to generally play the game. It was once again a masterpiece. Then the second DLC, House of Wolves, dropped, and Blizzard decided to release Prison of Elders in place of a raid. The activity was fun for a short while, but people quickly grew tired of it, and just when the game seemed to be dying down a bit, bam! Blizzard smacks us with the Taken King, an expansion that some think was even better than the base game itself. It brought with it a brand new campaign and a plethora of new items, quests, characters, and missions, and atop it all, a new raid in which you kill an actual god. This raid played off of what Destiny was supposed to be and made us feel physically powerful in its universe. Even after you completed the raid, you'd find yourself playing it again and again, finding new guardians to accomplish the feat alongside you. It made you want to keep playing and keep grinding in an attempt to make your guardian, your second identity, as powerful as possible. Forsaken, as I see it, is Destiny 2's Taken King. As I mentioned earlier, upon release, I, along with the majority of Destiny's players, found the sequel to be amazing. It had or seemed to have a great campaign stuffed full of character development and dialogue that gave life to the people we had been fighting alongside for the last 3 years. Even the final boss fight at the end of the game, though random, seemed pretty incredible at the time. But once you reached the in-game threshold and passed the honeymoon phase, you quickly realized that something was off. The game had a much more light-hearted feel than its predecessor and lacked almost all of the things that made Destiny 1 the masterpiece it was. Every gun and piece of armor was just a copy and paste of each other with different perks. Perks of which, by the way, no longer had random rolls. Each individual item had set abilities. There was no more grinding out strikes to get weapons or armor with 2 amazing perks. Everything was just the same. Exotics, the rarest items in the Destiny universe, lacked that special feeling they were supposed to have, and weren't better than any other normal weapon or armor. Even the strikes were just repurposed campaign missions. It was extremely easy to reach the max level, and its end game was almost non-existent. The raid was just, well, boring. It had no significance to the lore and had no items that were really worth playing for. The Nightfall, an insanely hard weekly strike with modifiers that changed how you'd play the game in Destiny 1, lacked those modifiers and the difficulty. The weekly challenges, which had you play a couple games of Crucible, do a couple strikes, or join public events, were just an obvious attempt to keep their player count high. It went from something that could be your daily hobby to a shell of a game that you could maybe play 4 hours a week. It just felt like a dumbed down, off-brand Destiny. The first DLC, Curse of Osiris, rolled out, and nothing changed. The plot was amazing and actually sort of set in with the lore, but the campaign itself was insanely repetitive and had you fight through the same location over and over again. There were more copy and pasted weapons and armor, and the new free roam location was the smallest map I've ever seen. They didn't introduce a new raid, but a raid layer, which was essentially just a shorter, lazier version. You reached the max level in a week or two, and once again ran out of things to do. Along came the second DLC, Warmind, and it was even less interesting than the first, though it did have a much larger map and more quests. The new enemy was just ice-covered Hive, and alongside the second raid layer, the new in-game activity, Escalation Protocol, was so obnoxiously difficult that people had to cheat to even have a chance of beating it. By this time, the player base of Destiny was dwindling, and I think Blizzard realized they should probably start attempting to appease their fans again. Thus, Forsaken was released to anyone willing to spend even more money on the game that they had already purchased. Forsaken is, to put it simply, a start at resurrecting Destiny 1. There's a brand new campaign, full of amazing pre-rendered cutscenes and crazy quests. It introduces a brand new race, the Scorn, and pits you against 8 different Barons, all of who you need to kill to advance to the final boss. Each Baron has their own gimmick, and the fight against each of them heavily plays on it. The Trickster, for example, drops heavy ammo that explodes if you try to pick it up. It's such a creative and unique addition to the lackluster campaign we had until now. The new PvEVP game mode Gambit is just as creative, and pits 2 teams against one another in separate arenas while they fight enemies and attempt to screw each other over until one team claims victory. Random rolls on weapons have returned, giving players a reason to keep playing the game and keep grinding for that dream weapon. New crazy exotics have been added, and old ones have been revamped so they actually feel special and powerful. There's an in-game lore tab for people like me, and collectibles hidden around the universe to unlock more. They've added in 9 new special abilities, furthering the idea to build your character and play the game how you want to play it. There's multiple quests for exclusive exotic weapons that require long grinds to complete. There's not 1, but 2 new and massive areas to explore, the Tangled Shore and the Dreaming City, each being completely unique. The new raid, a continuation of the campaign, is extremely difficult and in-depth, and actually feels necessary lore-wise because the lives of an entire race are at stake. There are constantly things to do and bounties to complete that keep upgrading your character to make them actually feel powerful again. It honestly feels like I'm back in Destiny 1. Bottom line, if you, like me, were in love with classic Destiny, this is the perfect expansion. It's essentially the Taken King of Destiny 2 and fills almost every gap the sequel created. You can once again rekindle that feeling of power that's been associated with the game since its release. With Destiny 2 Forsaken, you can finally become legend.